Well, hello and welcome to another edition of Ask the Expert. I'm David Dundee. I'm Director of Education here at the Telus Museum in Cartersville, Georgia. And I want to thank our sponsors, Century Bank of Cartersville and Marriott Courtyard of Cartersville, and also Homelight for their sponsorship of this program. And I wanted to tell you about some exciting things coming up at the museum. This Friday night, Dr. Tammy Giovanelli will be here to talk about the geological wonders of Iceland. It is our 7 p.m. lecture, so you might want to come by for that. That'll be a fascinating thing to see. And then on Friday night, the December 3rd, our next lecture is Alan Kressler, world famous cave photographer, will be here to show some of his most spectacular pictures of caves. And we'll be exploring underground from the comfort of our theater here at Telus. And also that weekend, we will have a portable cave being brought to Telus. It's a walk-through cave or crawl-through cave for all ages. And we'll have the opening of our brand new cave exhibit here at the museum. So a lot of things happening with our lecture series. A little bit later on this month, on the morning of November 19th, we have scheduled, well, actually, I had nothing to do with the scheduling, but we have a lunar eclipse. It's not quite total, but it's pretty close to it. And so we'll have the observatory open from 2 a.m. until 6 a.m. to see that event. So hopefully we'll have clear weather for that. And then the following weekend in December, we have our annual PJ party at the museum on December 11th. And so Santa will be here and we'll have a lot of holiday fun. But I am also, you've heard of Festival of Trees. Well, we have Festival of Trains coming to Telus because we are filling our Great Hall and our Banquet Hall with model trains that you can come see on Saturday, the December 11th, and Sunday, December 12th. It's free with normal admission, or if you're a member, it's free to come see. And we'll have all sorts of trains in various sizes and gauges running for those 2 days. And you can meet the people who built those layouts, and they can tell you all about the fun they had building them. And we'll even have a lecture that's Saturday of one of our train experts talking about how you can start a hobby in model railroading. And we'll also have the Polar Express running in our theater that day. So all sorts of exciting things. And if you want to make sure you're in tune with what's going on at TELUS, just stay tuned to our website. That's where it all is. And today, we've got more excitement. Yep. Because we have, honored to have Dr. William Haseltine with us today. He is an amazing person. He's got I could spend the next hour just listing all his accomplishments of his career, but I'm just gonna do the highlights, I promise. But he is famous for his groundbreaking work on HIV/AIDS and human genome. He was a professor at the Harvard School of Medicine, where he founded two research departments on cancer and HIV/AIDS. He is founder and one is and CEO of the Human Genome Science. And he is also a founder and chairman of the president of Access Health International. This is a nonprofit, folks, that's dedicated to improving access to high-quality health worldwide, and that's just incredible. He, in 2001, was listed as one of the 100 most influential leaders in biotechnology by Time Magazine, and by one of the most influential leaders in biotechnology by Scientific American in 2015. So we are so excited to have you. And what caught my attention to bring Dr. Haseltine to our audience was his book. his brand new book called Science as a Superpower. And of course, in order to have superpowers, you have to have a superhero. And so I want to introduce to you my brand new superhero, Dr. Haseltine. Welcome to the program.
Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you for that generous introduction. And I wish I could participate in many of your exciting programs. It sounds great. I build model cranes for my grandchildren and try to show them various things. I've got a brand new telescope that kind of tracks the stars. So many things that you guys do I'd love to be part of. So keep it up. It sounds fantastic.
Well, you're invited anytime.
Thank you.
Well, Dr. Haseltine, could you tell us a little bit about your new book and tell us a little bit about what it's about and why parents would want to buy it for their youngsters, or why parents would want to read it themselves?
Well, I think the first thing, I wrote the book to help children, young children, people in high school, even college students, to understand what you can do with science today. And what is a superpower? Why would I call it science as a superpower? Well, when you look at the Marvel comics or any of the superheroes, they save the world. There's some asteroid coming. There's some evil god that's come down to Earth who's going to smash us all and control us all. There's something bubbling up from the ocean, like a new Godzilla that's going to come to get us. Could be a mad scientist setting off a nuclear bomb somewhere. And a superhero stops that. Science gives one person the ability to save the world. And I've had the privilege of knowing some of those superheroes. I just cite one that you may know that's relevant to today, and that's Jonas Salk. When I was a kid, I was in the era of polio in the 50s. That means just like the kids today, my activities were restricted. I grew up in a desert. It was boiling hot. I couldn't go to the movie theaters where it was cool. I couldn't go to the pool where I could have fun during the summer. I could only be with at most 3 friends because we're afraid of this getting polio. And I were people that I knew, kids that got paralyzed. It was terrifying. And that all ended when I got a shot. Jonas Salk had created a polio vaccine. That changed the whole world.
What year was that?
Everybody's. That was in 56, 57.
Mm-hmm.
And later on, it was the second generation. I took a sugar pill when I was in beginning high school because there was a second vaccine. And I got to know both Jonas Salk and Sabin. And even later in my career, when I was just joined the Harvard labs, I got the lab space with a man who actually discovered this polio virus, not the vaccine, the virus. And I actually was sitting at his desk, and down the hall was a special isolation room that was part of my lab where polio was first isolated. And those discoveries are really inspirational. One person can save the entire world, and has, and will continue to do so. Let's just take COVID, for example. The vaccine, the Moderna vaccine, which so many people have taken, was put together over a weekend by a young woman, a Black woman, at the National Institutes of Health. She got the information from the Chinese scientists. She was all prepared. She put that together. She's in my book, along with Jonas Salk, a young woman who helped save the world. There's now a new book just came out, The Shot That Saved the World. She's in it. She's in my book, she's in that book, and now she's a professor at my former Harvard School of Public Health. These are great stories. Another thing I'd like to say that's important about science today, I'm part of a group of my former colleagues at Harvard. There are about 90 to 100 of us. We meet once a week and discuss the latest results. But we do it as a collective, and we do it with results that are not even published, hot off the press, to help move the field forward. That's exciting as can be. I can tell you, every week I look forward to that.
What kinds of things are topics?
Yeah, they're really, really interesting topics. But one thing I think that's different from when I was a young scientist is that 2/3 of the people who present are young women.
Hmm.
It wasn't the case. Science is a great career, not just for men, but now for young women as well, science and medicine. And there are more women in biomedicine today and as doctors than there are men going through the education process. It's great to see that total contribution from all of society. And it's another thing that science doesn't care where you came from, what country you came from, what social strata you came from, what color you are, what your sexual preference is. They don't care. They care about your ideas. And that is really a wonderful feeling. And I think it's something that I'd like people to understand. Also, it's a career for social mobility. It doesn't matter if you come from a poor background. It doesn't matter if you were unhappy as a kid, which I was. As a scientist, you can, all that goes burned away, and what people care about is your ideas. That's and I can't think of almost any other part of our world where that's true. And so it's a wonderful career. It just opens door after door. And so that's why I wrote the book, to try to communicate some of the gift that has been given to me to other young people who are just beginning to think about their lives.
And certainly your book was just a sequence of opening doors throughout your whole life, from one thing to the next. It was fascinating to follow it all.
You don't have to, I started out as a chemist. I became a chemical physicist, a biophysicist, a molecular biologist, a virologist, a cancer researcher. Then I started a career in business. I created as biotechnology companies. I became CEO of a public company for many years, developed drugs, got the drugs approved through the FDA process. Now I'm running a foundation. At the same time, I've traveled all over the world. I've met fantastic people from all walks of life. I've interfaced with the political system to try to get the money that's needed for research, to try to destigmatize major diseases. So I have to say, I've had a career I could never have imagined. Just your own energy coupled. There's another lesson I think important for young people. When you're young, you see life as a series of barriers you have to get over, like hurdles, right? There's a lot of barriers that you see in front of you. But when you're like me on the other end of that, you're looking for those people who can jump over those barriers. We're trying to find you. We're trying to find those gems of young people who have the excitement, who have the energy, who have the talent and the desire to see them. Again, we're looking for you. So you may think we've put up barriers. That isn't how it looks to us. We're looking to find you. And I think that's really something that I didn't know in those days. I was fortunate that some people found me and helped me along my way. And that's another thing. If you do your work, you're excited about it, you're interested in it, people will see that. And they'll reach out their hand to help you. I can't tell you how many times people have reached out their hand to help me in difficult situations and help me get to the next step of my career. Those are called mentors. But mentors are looking for you who got the excitement, the dedication, the discipline to do things and who want to do things. And people will recognize your energy and your enthusiasm. And that's, I think, a really important thing for young people to know. We're looking for you.
Well, I have a question from our virtual audience saying, are there any fields outside your area of study that fascinates you? For example, I am an entomologist, but I never pass up an opportunity to check out books on paleontology or visit dinosaur museums.
Well, I'm glad you asked that question because, as it happens, paleoanthropology is something I've been very, very interested in. I'm on the board of the Lee Berger's Foundation in South Africa. And he is, I would say, the preeminent paleoanthropologist today. When I first went to South Africa, I was looking, of course, at the beautiful animals, but I had a good experience. I asked my travel agent, I said, why I'm here? Is there anybody who's really good in paleoanthropology? He said, you bet there is. Let me introduce you. So I went out to Witwatersrand University And there was Lieberger, who had he just was finishing a discovery of an entire new human species. Actually, he went out with his son, his 9-year-old son, who picked up a rock and said, "Hey, Dad, it was a bone here." And from across the thing, he said, "I did my PhD on the human clavicle. That's a clavicle." Turned it over, and there was a skull. Oh my God, there's a whole skeleton here. And there's a whole place called Malapa, and he's found about 5, 6 bodies, just digging deeper and deeper from that hominid species, about 2 million years old.
Wow.
I invited him to speak. I have a seminar series I do here in New York for the World Science Festival. A bunch of people came over to the house, and I invited Lee, who was coming. Lee said, "Boy, did you find the right time. Let me tell you what I just found. I hired a bunch of spelunkers to go into caves, your cave, and to look for things, and even explore caves that had been explored before, but go deeper." Guess what they showed me? A chamber where there are probably 50 bodies. And over the last 10 years, he's discovered an entire new human species called Homo naledi. And what's fascinating about that is that Homo naledi overlaps with human beings. These animals that were Homo something, they have arms and limbs that look almost like ours, but their body looks much more like an ape. Very interesting. Their brain looks like a modern brain, but small, not like a more simple brain, like Homo ergaster, for example. And as a result of that, and actually I took my family, my wife and 2 daughters are very skinny. They can get in there. This cave is, these people put their dead in the deep recesses of caves where animals couldn't get them. This is a non-human species. This one chamber has about 50 bodies in it, of all ages. But there's other little resources that tucked away other. They didn't want an animal to eat those bodies. That's what I think. And it wasn't human. They had fire. Fire we've had for a couple million years. They got deep into these caves. You have to go down like 75 feet, go through what's called the Superman passage, where if you're skinny enough, you could go through like that. I have pictures of my daughters and wife going through like that. Then you get into a chamber. Then you go up and then straight down into a chamber is 17 inches wide and takes you an hour to wiggle through. Then you get where the bodies are. It's amazing. And he's now got so many bones that he's got 3,000 people all over the world collaborating with him from every kind of field. And now they're doing cultural paleoanthropology to try to match culture to what these people were actually doing. So you hit on a good one there. I'm very, very interested in paleoanthropology and astronomy and a bunch of other stuff.
I note in your bio that you're a patron of the Metropolitan Opera and the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Guggenheim Museum and Modern Art. So you're well versed in museums and the arts.
I've been on the board of the American Museum of History, the American Museum of History of the Smithsonian down in Washington. I've been on a bunch of museum boards, and for a while I was the chairman of the National Health Museum, which is never built due to various kinds of political cross pressures, but it's something we need. We need a National Health Museum. And I tried to get that off the ground, but ran into what is called politics.
Yeah, it's around. So looking through some of my research on you, I see that you were one of the first people to receive penicillin. Tell us about that.
Well, I had nothing to do with it, but my mom sure did. You know, penicillin was a great discovery. It opened the whole era of antibiotics. And Alexander Fleming, back in the late 20s, 30s, made the discovery that bread mold kills off bacteria. And then during the war, groups, Merck and other companies, learned how to grow it in abundance. And it started saving lives, people who would have died from their wounds. And in fact, it's an interesting story because we got the patents in the US for that, for helping Britain in the war. Our Lend-Lease program, one of the returns for that was the rights to make penicillin. Well, it was winter, like January 1945, and I was about 4 months old and apparently had pneumonia. And only military could get penicillin. Now, I was on a military base because my dad was in the military, like every guy in World War II, and I was Jefferson Barracks in St. Louis. My mother, I don't know what she did, but she got me a shot of penicillin. I'm alive today because of that. And I've gone through 3 or 4 major episodes where medicine has saved my life. I would have been long gone, age 4 months, and many times thereafter, if it weren't for modern medicine. My most recent serious event was a throat cancer. Now, it happened at Dana-Farber. I worked really hard on throat cancer and figured out a way to change the mortality of smoking-related cancers from 80% to 20% over a 5-year period. And I actually helped design those protocols. So I was doing my cancer therapy. And so I knew a heck of a lot about it. And that helped me because I knew who the best doctors were. I went to see them. And I knew which drugs I wanted to take, which drugs I didn't want to take for the side effects, especially one that they wanted to give me. And I had studied all the side effects and written 4 or 5 papers on it. I said, not for me. And so it paid off for me personally. That was 5 years ago. And so far I'm cancer free.
Oh, that's amazing. So let me switch gears and ask you about your explosive adventures with your gunpowder experiments. I'm kind of curious about that.
I grew up on a military base, so I saw a lot of explosions. We'd see they invented a lot of the rockets that you read, the Sidewinder missile. My neighbor across the street invented the heat-seeking missile based on his observation of snakes in the desert that we had to watch out for when we go lizard hunting. Just to tell the kids, I used to tear apart bushes to get lizards. One day, I didn't do it, my friend did. We said, I got him. He pulled out, he had a rattlesnake in his hand. It wasn't the lizard, there was a rattlesnake down there. They use heat sensors.
Yep.
See things. And later, my brother actually got his PhD working on how that heat censoring of anacondas is wired into what's called the tectum. And I went down to the Amazon with him. He said, Bill, we're going to go look for some anacondas. So we were in this little boat, and he put out a really hot heat source. He said, they can't. It's like a super stimulus. They got to hit it. I said, they got to hit it. What does it if they hit me? I'm standing right behind you. He said, well, listen, Bill, don't worry about it. We have to remember, if he hits you on the head, which he's probably going to hit you, hit him on the nose before he can wrap around you. Oh, thanks, Eric. There were no anacondas that night, thank God. Anyway, so back to the rocket. So I saw things blowing up. So I said, let's figure out how to make some gunpowder. So I read the recipes, and figured out that you need saltpeter, you need charcoal, and you need sulfur. And so I went to the pharmacy and I got them. And I got charcoal from one place. I got saltpeter and sulfur flowers. I mixed them up in different proportions. And I would stuff them into model airplanes and blow them up. And it was a lot of fun. Until one day I was grinding it away and I must have had a spark. And my whole preparation went kablooey and burned up my desk. And my dad wasn't very pleased. And just a couple of months ago, I talked to my brother. He said, my younger brother, he said, I had to sleep in that room, Bill. That room smelled like burnt gunpowder for 3 months.
But you weren't hurt.
Later, he went on to become the head of all technology at Disney. And especially, he was head of the Disney Imagineering, and he had to hire a lot of people. One of the hiring criteria is, did you blow things up when you were a kid? And the answer was yes. That was a big plus.
But you weren't hurt in the explosion, just your desk.
I jumped back, and my gunpowder wasn't very good, to tell you the truth. I never quite got it so it really went bang. But I did figure out how to make a super rocket. You shave match heads to a powder. Oh, yes. And you put them into a CO2 canister. And you make a little fuse, and I had a metal bar like this. I could blow a hole through 2 inches of concrete. That is one good rocket, but you got to be careful where you use it. I'm not done with rockets, by the way. You can see in my background, I've got one. And with my grandchildren, I use these Estes rockets. And the most recent thing we did is try to send eggs up and bring them back whole. And I'm glad to say we've done it. 2 out of 3. Third, not so good.
The results were scrambled?
Eggs, right.
So let me hear about your adventure with your father that got sick from your bacteria you were storing in the refrigerator.
Well, I just learned in junior high, I think, about Koch's postulates. And there was going to be a science festival, a science fair. Maybe I was in maybe first year high school. There was a science fair. I thought, gee, can I do Koch's postulates? So I got myself a little incubator. I read about how you make agar, got some petri dishes, and started isolating bacteria from everywhere. But my favorite was a bacteria that eats up blood. It's called hemolytic. And you get blood agar that really has hemoglobin in it. And so it's red. And you plate the bacteria out and you get the ones that make a clear area around it. Okay, now it turns out those are the ones that are pretty pathogenic. So I thought that's going to be good. I'm going to put it into a animal. I'm going to figure out, get a bunch of antibiotics and figure out which ones kill the bacteria and which ones don't. We'll give it to a rat, get some rats, give it to them. And if they get boils, we'll do an experiment where we treat it with an antibiotic that does work against killing them and one that doesn't. And then we'll also isolate it, try to give it the whole thing. So I was there busy cooking up, using my mom's pressure cooker to make the agar and stored all these things in the fridge until one day my dad got sick. And he got sicker and sicker, and his temperature went from 102 to 103 to 104 to 105. Now at 105, you die if you've got it for very long. You get something called explosive heat death, where your body just goes higher and higher and higher. Your body can't take a temperature more than about 106, 107 for any time at all. They rushed him to the hospital. He was there for 2 weeks. They never figured out what they got, but they figured I gave it to him because they had all these hemolytic bacteria in the fridge, and that was the end of that. But I never lost my interest in bacteria, and I got my PhD studying something very interesting, which is something you might not think about. If you think every day you poop, right? Everybody does. Half of that dry weight is bacteria. Half of it. So you're a big bacterial fermenter. Now, the bacteria in your gut are really interesting. They have two basic forms: grow like hell when the food is there, shut down, and scavenge when it's not. So there's a big program that says make a lot more of stuff to make more bacteria, all the proteins, the cell walls, all the stuff, or don't. Just sit there and rest and try to make it through. That's going on in your gut all the time. My PhD thesis was figuring out what that switch is. And I was able to do that thanks to great mentors. I had, that time, two mentors. One was James D. Watson, the guy who's co-discovered DNA. Another, Walter Gilbert, the guy who figured out how to read the sequence of DNA. Mm-hmm. So you couldn't have had better mentors than these two guys, both of which got Nobel Prizes for their work. And they were my mentors to teach me how to figure out that switch. Now, why is that switch so important? The question we were trying to understand is why one cell in your body is different from another. And the idea was if we could figure out for bacteria, life is all a unity. And a very famous French professor once said, if it's true for a bacterium, actually a phage, it eats up bacteria, it's true for the elephant. He was only partly right. There are unifying themes. And so it was a pretty big deal to try to figure that out. And that's what I did as a graduate student.
That's very interesting. And so knowing the switch, how did it impact treating health of human beings beyond that?
I can't say how it impacted health so much. I've made other discoveries that have made big impacts on health. What it did for me is at that time, it was the Vietnam era, and I was very active as an anti-war activist. And I was a journalist, and I got my stories published in national newspapers, like the New Republic. My biggest story was breaking the Agent Orange story. Now, you might not know about that story, but it's one of the stories from the Vietnam era that reverberates today, because we were spraying the whole country with defoliants. And it turned out those defoliants caused birth defects and caused cancer in people who were sprayed and the people who gave the spraying. And so it was a really big deal. And I was teaching a course called Biology and Social Issues that I started as a graduate student and for Harvard undergraduates, and came across this story and broke it. So I was thinking maybe I'll be a scientific journalist. But the moment I made a great big discovery, and this was a big discovery, front page of Science and Nature and everything, I thought, okay, I'll be a scientist. Unless you're successful pretty early on, it's really hard to be a scientist. You have to have success because science is really hard. One thing that people really don't quite understand unless you're doing it is how unknown the unknown is. You know, I'll tell you the feeling. I can't tell you exactly how unknown it is, but it's really unknown. The feeling is you're in the bottom of a deep cave with almost no light at all, and there's a black wall in front of you, and somewhere there might be a diamond, and you're down there chipping away, and you don't know if your chipping away is ever going to get to that diamond or just some more rock flakes. That's what it feels like. I've been lucky enough to find some diamonds. Part of it's luck, part of it's perseverance, but more than that, it's understanding what tools you have to solve the problem you're interested in. I've known people who solved amazing problems, like Jim Watson. How do we inherit? That's a huge question people have asked for generations. As long as people have noticed that their kids have blue eyes or brown eyes, or are tall or short, people wondered, how do we inherit? He figured it out with Francis Crick. That's a pretty big one.
Yes.
Another guy I knew figured out how we see color. Somebody my age figured out how we smell. Somebody else figured out how we taste. I know people who did that. One of the things that makes all life possible is photosynthesis. Imagine you take energy from the sun. Plants eat light. They take carbon from the atmosphere and they make solid wood. How the heck does that happen? I try to tell my grandchildren, look, here's a leaf, here's a piece of wood. This was in the atmosphere. How did it happen? Well, Melvin Calvin, who I got to meet and got to know, figured it out. So people can answer, but the trick is, do you have the tool that allows you to answer the question? For Jim Watson, it was X-ray crystallography had just come online, and he knew that was a tool. For Melvin Calvin, it was nuclear isotopes that allowed him to trace the path of carbon through the life cycle. For me, deciphering the human genome, and I was the first, my group company was first to isolate all the human genes. It was a combination of DNA sequencing, automated, computer science that allowed you to use lots of information, and laboratory robots all came together. And within 6 months of that, we could then sequence the whole genome. Couldn't do it before that. So it's knowing what tools are there to solve a problem that everybody's wanted to solve. Okay? And that's the trick. And that's what you learn from great mentors. Not what a lot of big problems are, but you learn that are problems that can be solved. Really big problems, like how to stop COVID. That's a big problem, right? Well, I think.
Well, when you're dealing with something like COVID, it's almost a moving target in a way, because you have a virus that doesn't stay the same.
Right,
it
but
evolves.
Let me remind you, at the very beginning, everybody said it stayed the same. Don't worry about it. I don't know if you remember those days, but I'm one of the sole dissenters that said, hey guys, that's not smart. There's going to be no such thing called herd immunity. Ain't going to happen. And some countries that pushed herd immunity, including ours, suffer horribly as a result.
Mm-hmm.
Other countries said, oh, I don't think there's going to be herd immunity. This is pretty darn dangerous. We better control it as best we can. So that issue is important. Now, we're in the process, but it's also really interesting. For example, vaccines. What does a vaccine do? You know, most people think of vaccines like a shield that you put around you, and it keeps the bugs out. Okay? So sort of you're in this plastic shield, and okay, the bugs can't kill me. A vaccine is like an alarm once the fire goes off. It's like an alarm that's connected directly to the fire department, so they can get there quickly. If you've been vaccinated, you have a direct connection to the fire department. They can come and put that fire out immediately. If you've not been vaccinated, the virus burns for quite a while before you put it out. So the organisms get into you, and either you react quickly or you react slowly. Okay, now but it takes a while to get a reaction. What is the problem with COVID? Or influenza? Virus gets into you, and it's so darn fast, your body doesn't even have time to react before it gets out and infects somebody else. Now, maybe it'll react to save you from getting sick and dying. So the whole idea that vaccines are going to stop this cold didn't work. Huge disappointment. If you knew enough about virology, you could see that that was going to happen. But I can tell you, having been able to see it and being believed is something really different. There's a great Greek myth called Cassandra. Mm-hmm. Cassandra was she was the lover of some god who gave her the gift of foreseeing the future. And then they had a falling out. Said, okay, I can't take my gift away, but I'm going to make a condition. You can see the future, but nobody else will believe you. Okay? But it's actually, you learn if you become prominent. There's another twist to that story. And the twist is, you can see the future, you can be listened to, and you can not be believed. Okay? It isn't, you can say, oh, people just don't listen to that person. No, they'll listen. They just don't believe you. I'll give you a current example. There's a drug that's currently being promoted, molnupiravir by Merck. We've got 80 tons of it already in the US. I see that drug could cause the virus to mutate more quickly. And I'm listened to. I'm not believed. Okay, I say that drug is dangerous. There's other drugs you can use. Don't use that drug. You're going to see that drug is going to get approved. And there may be a cynical bet that who will ever know if it was that drug that caused the virus to change. You're actually mutating a virus. I scream and holler about it. People are listening to me. That drug's going to get approved anyway. So just because you see the future doesn't mean that you can be right. But that doesn't mean it changes much.
How does that drug work differently than a vaccine?
Well, a drug kills the organism directly. Okay? The way this drug works is it mutates it to death. Hear that word. It mutates it to death. What happens if I don't take quite enough drug? Then it just simply mutates it. Okay? But it kills it. A vaccine mobilizes your immune system to shut it down. So you are doing the work. Your antibodies and your cells are killing the invading organism. With a drug, it's killing it directly. That's the difference between a drug. And so you wait till you get sick. Oh, I'm feeling sick. I'm going to pop the pill. And it can save you. I mean, these are going to be some good drugs that will save a lot of people. Much better to be vaccinated because then you don't get sick to begin with. That's the real difference.
Wow.
And it's another difference. The vaccine's free to everybody. The drug costs $700 a dose of treatment in the US. So that's another big difference. There are antibodies that also will stop disease progression. They cost well over $1,000 a treatment. So that's a big difference. You're free and protected for a while. Let me just say with most vaccines, you need several shots. Now we know for COVID, at least to get good protection, you use 3 shots. And maybe we'll need a booster like we do with flu in another year. We'll see.
We don't have enough data to say we would do.
No enough data to know that you need 3 shots now.
Yeah.
Now, even on that, it's a little controversial. I'm ahead of the curve. Okay. It's just now the curve is catching up and saying, yeah, you were going to need 3 shots.
Yeah.
6 months from now, that's where the curve will be.
So in addition to all the other things we've talked about, you are a world traveler. And in one of your adventures, you cycled across Europe. I think that's kind of interesting.
Very lucky. I came from a tiny little desert town. They put it there so if they dropped a bomb and missed by 20 miles, nobody would get hurt except a few jackrabbits. Okay. So I grew up. It was a beautiful place, and I loved growing up there. You're really free, no worry about a car running you over because there's no cars. Okay. So I would get on after high school, get on a horse and ride out into the desert. It was a great place. And Boy Scouts, we'd climb up into the High Sierra on weekends and go camping. And it was a great place for a kid. But it gave me a wanderlust. So when I was graduated from high school, I was lucky enough my parents supported me to bicycle all around Europe. When I graduated from university, I took a trip all over the world. And I haven't stopped since, except COVID has stopped me dead. Okay? Just before COVID, I was in the deep forests of Borneo, looking at orangutans in the primal forest in the Danam Valley. I recommended it's a place to go. Just after that, my wife and I went to see the Highland gorillas at Virunga National Park, where I was also visiting the University of Global Health Equity at the border of Congo, Uganda, and Rwanda. I'll tell you one thing. When I got back from university for my trip around the world, I realized how lucky I was. You know, my mom had always told me, hey, Bill, you're really lucky. You're born in America. You're born in California. It's the greatest place on earth. After seeing the way people lived in the mid-'60s around the world, I was convinced she was right. I was so happy to get my one-room apartment in married students' housing at Harvard with a functional bathroom and a clean space after what I had seen around the world. I saw people dying. I went to, Calcutta in 1966. You'd literally walk over dead and dying bodies. And the things you would see have always stayed with me, that there is such inequity in the world, both in health and economic income and other things, that I always wanted to try to do something with my life to improve it. And fortunately now with my foundation, I can do that. We've had a major impact in India. I've got 100 people working for me there. And we've advised and helped their government restructure some of their health systems for the poorest of the poor there. And India's developing very rapidly, so it isn't what it was before, but they still got a lot of problems. And we're able to help. We're able to, help a lot. And I think that's a great privilege to be able to do that. But that experience, that travel. But I was really lucky in high school. I spent my one summer on a Navy ship. They were trying to recruit me into the Navy, so at 15. I spent the summer on a troop transport all over the Pacific and went to Japan. When I was a junior, between junior and senior year, I won a trip the Oddfellows and Rebecca's sponsored. So I spent the summer on a bus with a bunch of other kids going all over the United States and spent a couple of weeks in New York at the United Nations. And I just never stopped traveling, except COVID has clipped my wings. I've been in place since March 2020.
Yeah, as many of us have.
2019, I was in Wuhan, China. I'm the president of the U.S.-China Healthcare Summit, and we had our meeting there. And that's right when the pandemic was starting, right there in that city. And I was there.
Wow.
Yeah. I was at the place where you see Mao swimming around with that little head bobbing around. Mao Zedong, if you remember those pictures. I was right. We had our conference at at the resort he had built for him there. Beautiful place, Wuhan, I have to say.
So do you have a particular favorite spot on the globe that you enjoy visiting more than any other?
Is where my grandchildren are. Wherever they are is my favorite spot.
Well said. You've kept happiness in the family.
Yes.
So of all of your accomplishments in your professional career, what can you point to one that is probably your most proudest accomplishment? Was it your work on HIV or was it something else?
I'll point to two, if I get to. First is with HIV, working not even in science. But the big problem with HIV is people thought that they were deadly and shunned them. And I helped create two societies, American Foundation for AIDS Research and AIDS Crisis Trust. And the AIDS Crisis Trust worked very closely with Princess Diana. And we worked with her to try to destigmatize HIV. And finally, she agreed to hug an AIDS baby, hold an AIDS baby, and hug an AIDS man. Those images went all over the world and destigmatized AIDS. They're not going to kill you. You can hug them, you can take care of them. And I'm very proud of that, because that, I didn't hug the baby. It wouldn't have made any difference. But getting her to hug the baby changed everybody's attitudes almost overnight. Is AIDS a disease of pariahs, or is it something we as a society should engage in? And little known is that George W. Bush created a program which Americans have spent $10 billion a year since he was president, and every year, to save people in Africa. And American dollars have saved tens of millions of African lives. And part of that whole thing was getting that message across. It's an important disease. Every life is valuable, and you should be speaking. That's the first thing. The second one is kind of scientific. And it was, how do you have something in your hands that's tangible to work on a disease? And although you might think there's so many different diseases, I was aware, doing what I was doing, that there are very few opportunities to really do drug discovery. For every disease, for everything we have there at one time, starting about, let's say that year would be about the year 2000. No, the year 1990. There are only about 200 targets you could really work on for bacteria and humans. Genomics offered an opportunity to change that. Now, most people think of genomics as genetics. Why are my eyes blue or green? Or am I going to die young? Am I going to get cancer? No. Genomics also has another form, which is understanding that genes make the proteins, which are like the Lego blocks of a human being. And I realized the technology existed to be able to get all of those building blocks and have them all labeled red, green, blue, every 22,000 different colors. And then create a computer system I called the Oracle, which said, what's the difference between a cancer cell in the tonsil and a normal cell in the tonsil? And we could ask our Oracle, because we did all that work. Bingo. And then we had the gene in our freezer. So the time between asking the question and beginning the work was about 10 minutes. Okay? Not 30 years, which it was before. We shortened the path from the desire to treat and cure a disease to a starting point from 30 years to 10 minutes.
Amazing.
And if people didn't think it would happen, everybody said, oh, no, you can't do that. Once we did it and showed it worked, a friend of mine called it clone by phone, the rest of the world took it up. And now it's a tool everybody uses. It's like breathing. They don't even think about it. Well, before we created it, people didn't think it would work. Now they use it without thinking. That is success to me. We did find our own drugs. We made a lot of money from it. That isn't the success that counts to me. We changed in a fundamental way, we and my team that I put together there, and the way drugs are discovered, and cracked open almost every medical problem. So those are the things I'm proudest of, because they make the biggest impact. You know, I can talk about a lot of other things that were fun to do, like burning holes through brick walls across the bay with a powerful laser, or stuff like that. But it's really making a difference to human life that I think is the most important. And it's going back to the very first question, superpower. What's a superpower? It's a way to change the world for the better.
So having been through or going through this pandemic, has it made us better equipped for future pandemics?
You know, that's a really interesting question. And I don't think it's made us worse. But what it's done is it's magnified our failings. Just take our own country. It magnified our lack of preparedness. It magnified weaknesses in our public health system. And it magnified issues of political difference, all of which are really big problems. Now, it's up to us to try to correct those problems, just in our own country. It's also shown how dependent we are on the rest of the world. And that's something we don't like to think about, but it is the case. And so whether we're not in this alone, this didn't start in the US, it's not going to end in the US. And unless it ends most places, it's not going to end here either. So those are lessons that we take. How many of these lessons is it going to take so we don't have to do this again and again? Now, again, Cassandra, I've been warning about this pandemic, a pandemic like this, since HIV days, where 37 million people so far have died from that disease around the world. Others have taken up that warning and were not listened to. Again, it's Cassandra, you can be right, you can be listened to, and it's even worse than that. You can be believed, but nobody will do anything about it because there's some other more pressing business, which there always is. There's always pressing business at hand. And so I hope that one of the lessons that comes out of this is that your individual behavior affects others as theirs does yours. And you go back to the Bible and the do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Be your brother's keeper. Your behavior affects them. Their behavior affects you. If you're both in tune to help each other, then you can move forward. If you can't, we're in trouble. And right now in this country, we're still in trouble. You know, everybody's reacting. I happen to be in New York at the moment. I spend most of my time in the countryside right now. People are going around like, you know, there's no COVID. A little bit, some mask here, mask there, but not really. They're going to big concerts and doing other things. While in Europe, there's a huge epidemic already there. Another wave. Right now, Holland has never had more people. Netherlands, sick. Germany, never more sick. Austria, never more sick. England.
Russia, too.
Eastern Europe, aflame. Russia, breaking every record of deaths per year. There's a huge epidemic. Every time that's happened, it's happened here about 2 months later. Remember Italy? First, Italy was in terrible crisis. Oh, that's over there. Don't worry about it. Boom. What happened to us? Oh, that's New York. Don't worry about it in Atlanta. Okay. Don't worry about it in Texas. Oh, all those Northeasterners. We don't care about those guys anyway. Okay. Our real men are down here in the South. They got it. It was their turn in the barrel too. We got to learn that this is global. What's happening there is going to happen here. I'm sounding the alarm. Nobody listens. Or as I say, if they listen, they're not changing. We have to be very careful because they vaccinate like we vaccinate. They wear masks better than we wear masks. What's to stop it from coming back here when it's already blowing up like crazy right now as you and I are speaking? All you have to do if you want to look at it is go on COVID cases country on Google, and you'll see what's going on. I do it for Germany, do it for Latvia, do it for UK, do it for Norway. Okay, you'll see, and do it for France where it's coming up again, just like it did before. So I'm worried. And have we learned? Not yet. We haven't learned yet.
So, since you're good at seeing into the future, what do you think the next few years are going to look like for COVID?
We're going to have repeated waves of COVID. Hopefully, what the vaccines will do is if you've been vaccinated, you're not going to, people, especially older people, aren't going to die in the same numbers. And that since it's mostly older people who die, although younger people can be seriously ill with long COVID, I think the impact is going to be less, but it's still going to be pretty dangerous for, I'm now over a certain age and it's dangerous for me. And it's dangerous for anybody who's over 65. And, we have a lot of parents, grandparents, people we love who are over 65, and it's going to be a real danger for them. Younger people, even, vaccinating is going to help. So I see a continued struggle. Fortunately, science is going to keep coming up with various solutions. We have antibodies now, we have drugs, um, but we're not doing the fundamental blocking and tackling. We're not doing the first defense that works best. Fail safe is public health. Identify those who are infected, contact trace those people, and make sure they're either treated or isolated so they can't infect other people. It's going to get easier with the drugs. Identify, contact trace, treat, and make sure they don't infect others.
Sure.
That will stop this. We don't do that. We never have done it. Our testing has been subpar. Our contact tracing has been virtually non-existent. And once you find people who've been exposed, we do nothing. Oh, stay home. All right. Then you infect your family. Okay. So hopefully in the next few years, we will say, take a pill. You've been exposed. That's what I hope will happen. But before we find the people who've got to take the pill, we've got to do the identification and the contact tracing. And as I speak, you know as well as I do, there are going to be big issues with contact tracing. What? You want to tell me who I've been with for the last 3 weeks? It's none of your business. Well, it is our business because it's our lives. But not everybody will see it that way. So hopefully we can get to a point where it's a little bit better through science and through goodwill.
Yes. Yes, indeed. So if people want to order this new book, how can they get a copy?
Amazon.
Okay.
Best thing. Just Amazon. You can get it either as an ebook immediately or print on demand. And we try to make it just as cheap as possible, given the fact that you got to print your copy. But you get it in ebook or on Amazon and other sites, Barnes and Noble sites, other sites will sell it.
I'll have to.
And any high school, we're willing to give it for free. So any high school write to us through my website, william.haseltine.com, Haseltine, william.haseltine.com. Or we are happy, or at, I think it's .com. We are happy to, I think it's just williamhaseltine.com actually. We'll give it to you for free if you're high school. We'll give you a code that you can give to your students. And by the way, once a week, at least, I'm speaking to a junior high, elementary, or high school class about, I've written an autobiography, which is a much longer version of that, called My Lifelong Fight Against Disease. But I speak about one or another things to kids. It's been a lot of fun. And I tell you, my best experience is one of the classrooms from a difficult area of the city that I was speaking to virtually. Actually, they took what I said and each of them drew a picture. There were like 25 different pictures illustrating some of the points I made. They all drew a picture and they sent it to me, and I'm making a little book out of that. My favorite, I think, is I remember I was not doing very well in 4th grade, and my teacher used to grab me with her long red fingernails and take me into the corner. And so there's a picture of this teacher with the long red fingernails getting ready to haul me off into the corner for punishment.
Was something they...
This is, I still remember that. You don't forget those long red fingernails.
Yeah. Made an impression on you.
It surely did.
Well, Dr. Haseltine, it's been an absolute pleasure in this past hour talking to you, and we could probably talk for hours more, but I thoroughly enjoyed hearing about your adventures, and I'm excited that you are part of a group of very active scientists still trying to make the world a better place, and I applaud you for that. And
well, thanks. And the thing about having a positive goal in life, it makes you positive.
Yep.
And it's the thing I want to communicate to young kids is science is not dry. It is exciting as anything. It's like the feeling you have when you're doing science and trying to understand things like the COVID virus or the AIDS virus. It feels like you're in Le Mans. and a race car driver. Vroom, vroom. And by the way, you're competing with others too. So there's that too. You're racing along and the courses keep changing and the people trying to cut you off and knock you out of the box. I mean, it's fun and it's exciting and it's competitive.
Yeah.
So it's got all the things that make and they're really interesting people. Your race car drivers are some of the most interesting people you'll ever meet. And now at least half of them are women, which is also good.
Yep.
And they are just as tough and competitive as you are.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Bill. It's been a pleasure. And thank you for helping us further our mission of teaching science here at TELUS. And I look forward to meeting you one day.
Hope so, too. Hope they get down. Sounds like
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.